Hey, everybody. Aloha. Wherever you are in the world today, I'm so glad you joined us on the webinar today. God is doing some amazing things, and no matter where you are, I don't even know what week it is. It's depending on when you shut down. Was it week 6? Is it week 9? Is it week 12 when you're listening to this? But I'm so glad that you joined us with this webinar podcast sponsored by the Influencers Network, Inspired, Kingdom Builders, and the Leader Lift podcast. So I'm really excited because today I have a man that I really admire and I've respected for several years now. His name is Bob Harrison. We call him Dr. Increase because of his ability to bring people into the room, write books, and just speak to thousands of people about increasing the way that they think, increasing their business, and increasing all kinds of things that go along with family, life, and business. And I think you're really going to enjoy it. This is going to be one for the ages. When you listen to this and you watch this, you're going to go, man, I'm taking notes. This is incredible. Bob has so much more experience than I do. He is a wealth of information and a deep well of knowledge. I really believe you are going to walk away from this absolutely incredibly blessed. So without further ado, and not to hold things up, I want to get straight to the webinar podcast with Dr. Increase, Bob Harrison. It's so good to be here with my good friend, Dr. Increase, Bob Harrison, such a great friend to the Equip and Inspire Network, as well as to the Influencers Network. I'm so grateful that you're here. Dr. Increase, good to see you, Bob Harrison. You look great.
Thank you. Thank you. Always good to be with you. I want you to know you're one of the people I admire so much. I mean, the first time I was at your church, I was so floored and so impressed. I took so many pictures, and I just love you, and what you've shared at our Increase events. It's been so powerful. It's just an honor to be with you, and an honor to be with the leaders, that are going to be watching today.
Absolutely. They love you. You've been to the Influencers Network. You spoke at the Pacific Club. Yeah. Just gem after gem. We call that in basketball, you were dropping dimes. You were dropping dimes, you're hitting threes. And it was incredible. And it's so good to have you back because from the time that we saw each other at the Pacific Club a few months back, and then from the time that we went to the Maui Increase event, and let me tell everybody about it later on, my gosh, how things have flipped.
It was like a different world.
Right.
I flew over to Hawaii. Everything's great. We're doing this thing we do a week in our event, and I get back to the mainland, everything's changed. I mean, it was like, boom. A time capsule, Back to the Future or something event. Yeah, so
absolutely.
So that dramatic of a change.
It has been a dramatic. At the end of this interview, I want to make sure that this conversation that we talk about the Maui Increase event. Okay, so we definitely have to talk about that. Okay, so Bob, before this all went down, we were there on Maui for about 4 or 5 days for your Increase Maui event, which we'll tell them all about for the third time. It was incredible. It was my third event. I brought Lisa. I brought 10 different couples that were, they paid their own way, and they were blown away. We started hearing the rumblings of shutting down of nations, shutting down of states, and eventually it came to America, where we all had to shut down and shelter in place.
Right.
From the time that we were already at the conference, on the last 2 days that I was there with you, I couldn't come downstairs because I was already prepping the staff to flip the switch, that we were gonna go 100% online. We didn't know what that looked like, but what a blessing that was, that even though in 1 week it was like this, the next week it was totally like this, Bob. We had Jensen Franklin. You brought Jensen Franklin, who gave a timely word, and all of the different speakers that were incredible. So, Bob, I really believe that in many ways I was prepared for this emotionally and spiritually and strategically because I was at your event called Increase when a time when the world was decreasing. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's very important that leaders recognize that if they're going to have continual success, that investing in times away from the routines in the business is critical. Because if we're always there, then we're taking care of tasks and we're doing projects, but many times we lose the big picture. And it's when we can pull back and get refreshed, when we can pull back and be around other super achievers and leaders many times that we get a different perspective. And I actually think that right now, we're going through this for a season. Many people, this has been a time of getting a different perspective.
Right.
And that's been good for them because they've been so busy they haven't seen it. Now they see things that have been there all along, but they didn't see them before because they were going so fast they weren't going slow enough to notice them. And
Right.
so I think in a way, all of this season is for many people has been a real positive time.
So, Bob, what have you noticed? And not only is it a good season in many ways, and in some ways it's terrible for some people, but we're making the most of it. Romans 8:28, got to use all things, work all things out for those who love him, called according to his purpose. But what are the different things that you've noticed, or some notes that you've been taking, or some observations that you've made besides those during this COVID crisis?
I think one of the real things is caused people to go back and analyze what is my real source. If we're not careful, we begin to think that our source is our real estate or our business or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And when those things get challenged or get shaken, it causes us to realize that maybe there has to be something more. And I think the foundation of a Christian leader has to be that whatever we face, we recognize God is our source.
Right.
And that the supply line might change, but God is still there. And if we will stay sensitive to his leading in his direction, he's got a new source for us. Mike, it reminds me of 1 Kings, the 17th chapter. I mean, there was a famine in the land. And God instructed the prophet, I want you to go to this brook. And if you go to the brook, I'll send ravens to feed you, and there's going to be water in the brook. And so it said the prophet went to the land, and everything he needed was supplied. The ravens came every day, just like the mail comes every day, the checks come every day, the customers come every day. Everything was going great. The water was there. And we can have a theological capsule if we're not careful there, and that is this. If I go where God tells me to go and I do what he tells me to do, all my needs will be met. Mm-hmm. We miss something because in the third verse it says the brook dried up.
It sure did.
So here he's where God told him to go and the brook dried up. So we're going to experience those times in our life where emotionally it dries up or financially it dries up or around us it dries up. And how we respond to that is going to make all the difference. Now, I see two responses. One response is, and this is why we have to be sensitive to God. One response is, we believe that the water is going to come back down the brook, so we stay by the brook.
Right.
Because we believe that's where God told us to go, and he hasn't told us to leave, so we stay by the brook. But if we're spiritually sensitive, there's other times God says, no, the season of this brook is over. Now there's a new season coming. You better leave this brook, and you better get to somewhere else, or you're going to miss it because the ravens aren't coming back and the water is not coming back. This brook is dry. And that's one reason why I believe that prayer needs to be such a key part of a Christian leader's arsenal.
So good.
It's easy to think that, we just do a bless me or bless the food or whatever, and we don't recognize that God speaks to us and directs us and guides us and inspires us. And if we're sensitive to his voice, we can operate on a whole different dimension than the natural man can. But we have to take that time to spend with him, to value his presence, and to recognize his voice. Because many times that voice is going to be contrary to what we see, contrary to what we think, and contrary to our history. But if we're sensitive to his voice, and we know when to stay and when to go, he's always got a supply for us.
That's so good. I feel like I was in the presence of God while you were speaking already. I mean, think about that for a moment. We can go to prayer. The natural man doesn't have that ability to connect with God like we can. Yeah. Stopping, pausing. Bob, I think that's all so important. Between seasons, Bob, between the brook season, and then God tells him, I want you to go to the widow. I've prepared a widow for you. First of all, I already trip out, right? I'm like, okay, you want me to go to a widow. I'm Elijah. I'm going to go to a widow and go ask her for food. You got to build my faith for that one. But you've already provided for me at the brook, and you've already provided for me with these dirty birds and giving me bread and meat morning and night. I got to trust you that I can go to a widow. What are the other things besides prayer that somebody, because prayer is number one. We all know that's paramount.
I think in my mind of, I was speaking at a seminar with Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Poor Dad, Rich Dad, whatever it is. Anyway, and he shared how when he was in the Marines, they had this course on survival. And they said, you might get shot down, you might get trapped behind enemy lines. And if you're going to survive, there's 4 keys to survive. And they said, you absolutely have to have power. Without power, you can't survive. But there's 4 kinds of power you have to have. Number 1, they said you have to have mental power. You have to be able to believe that you can get through these negative circumstances. You have to believe in yourself, that you're innovative, that you can figure out strategies and ways. You can find water, you can find food, you can find a way to hide. You have to believe in your mental capabilities. Now, part of that is, affirmations, and part of that is just, the attitude you can have. Part of it is drawing on experience. When David had to face the giant, he drew on his past experience. He said, I slew this bear, I slew this lion, and now this giant can be as one of them. So he got mental power based upon his past experiences. So that was one of them. Then he said you have to have physical power. You have to have the ability to endure. If you have a hike, or you're in any kind of a long race or run or whatever it might be, you have to have the ability to get to the end.
Right.
It's the same with this. We have to think in terms of our own physical power. And that's why it's so important that, even during this season when maybe we're out of our routine and our club might be closed, or we're not doing our normal exercise routine, that we find something that we're doing to stay sharp physically, and force ourselves to do a different routine or something, because we have to have the physical ability to be able to last and be empowered physically.
Right.
And then we have the third one he talked about. He said you have to have emotional power. And part of that is just an attitude, but part of that is what we choose to surround ourselves with. I've recognized that my emotions are a result of what I think about and the input I allow into my life.
Okay.
I don't live my life based upon my emotions. My emotions follow the way I'm living my life. So I control those emotions. Now, sure, there could be time of grief or whatever that you're deep sorrow you're really having a problem, but a normal lifestyle. And so I always find ways to keep myself happy, upbeat, positive, regardless of what I'm facing. I do that, and for me, it's it's sunshine. It could be the music I listen to. I try to minimize negative news. I want to know what's going on, but from that point on, I don't need to know anymore. I'd rather have praise and worship music. Okay. I'd rather be praising and thanking God. I'd rather be listening to a YouTube or teaching, audio teaching, that can feed me and give me knowledge and strength. I'm trying to empower myself. I had an instance when a few weeks ago. I just felt I really needed to give myself a charge, and one of my cars is I have a Porsche convertible. I've had it for several years, and it's just my fun car here in the desert. And so I just got in. Said I'm driving the Porsche today. So I got in the car, put the top down. I turned on the Beach Boys, and with vibrations, and and I just was young again. And by the time I got, it's only 5 minutes from my house to the office. But that 5 minutes, I was a different person. The fourth one is the one we talked about earlier, and in that way, you have to have spiritual power. And so, look at your life in terms of, I would say, suggest this to all of you that are watching. Just stop for a moment and take inventory. On a scale of 1 to 10, where are you right now in mental power? Where are you in physical power? Where are you in emotional power? And where are you in spiritual power?
Wow.
And if you're not at least 7 or 8 on any one of those scales, ask yourself, what can I begin this week to get empowered in those areas, because it's not enough to be empowered in 3 of the 4. To survive, you're going to have to be empowered in all 4.
Right.
A chair cannot function with 3 legs. It's going to need the 4th leg normally. And so you need to be empowered in all 4 of those legs.
That's so good. Hey, everybody, you listen to Dr. Increase, Bob Harrison. Right now, you're getting a master class, okay? An incredible master class. And there's so much more that he has. He's a wealth of knowledge, a deep well. Bob, I love this. What else? Come on, don't stop. I love it.
I would say, let's go back to the First Kings. Recognize that sources are going to change. I got a real insight into this a few years ago. One of the churches I regularly speak at is in Phoenix, Arizona. And I love this church, not only because I've had a relationship with the pastor for so many years, but he tells me the middle of April, when the NFL football schedule comes out, he said, pick the game that you want to go to, the Arizona Cardinals, because their church is near the stadium. And that's a Sunday, we'll have you come. So I come and speak at the church, and then we go to a game. Whatever it might be, Pittsburgh Steelers or Green Bay Packers or Seattle Seahawks, whatever team I decide I want to watch that year.
That's awesome.
And so we're standing outside ready to get into one of these games, and he brought one of his businessmen of the church with him. And I began to talk to this guy and found out that he had a 6-figure income at this particular company, and they eliminated the division. Just shut down the whole division. So all of a sudden he goes from 6 figures, he's out of a job. He's not making any money. Now, he had some reserves, thank goodness, and that's another subject. But he had some reserves, so he was living off of his reserves and sent out applications to get other jobs. But his job was so specific, he was having a real hard time finding another job. He said, but during this time, I was talking to somebody, and they were doing this crazy thing. They were running these ads on the internet selling merchandise. And I said, what are you doing that for? And the guy told him what he was doing. Well, here's the story. Nordstrom's Rack has 2 outlets in America. In other words, what do you do with product? What does Nordstrom's do with product that doesn't sell at the rack? It goes from Nordstrom to the rack. What if it doesn't sell at the rack? Well, they have 2 outlet stores, and one of them is in Phoenix. He said, I tried this out. This guy suggested it to me. I went down and bought certain items, began to advertise them on eBay. He said, I found out which ones sold. Then I went and bought more of those and advertised those on eBay. He said, I got it down to a system of knowing what was selling, what wasn't selling. When I was standing in line with that man, he was making a 6-figure income, going down to this store, buying product at the store and selling on an eBay, and being done at 1 o'clock and playing golf every day. So what did he do? He found another source. And I think part of that is my teaching on the number 8. And that is, we've got to believe that whatever we need is already out there. It already exists. And God can direct us and show us to find it.
So good.
If we'll be open to see it and to hear his voice and to believe that what I need is there.
Bob, this is brilliant stuff. I love it. I love that story. I love it how that man found a different source. I'm going from a 6-figure income to going to nothing and trying to find another source. That's not easy, especially in an economy where people may not necessarily be hiring right now. I think there's kind of maybe a hiring freeze. Right. Bob, I want to talk to you about that. If you would speak into that. I wonder if more positions will open up in the future, because what this COVID crisis is teaching us is who can adapt, who can work from home and be remote and be responsible and trusted with that kind of freedom in order to do what they need to do. And I think opportunities will open up again, but right now there's a freeze for the most part, but more opportunities going to come. What do you talk about? How do you talk about opportunities, and what do you see those like?
I would say, first of all, opportunities will normally come to people that are faithful, and people that show they're responsible, and people that are always trying to do more than what's expected. Let me say that again. Over the course of years of dealing with leaders, I found that normally opportunities come to those that are faithful. They've demonstrated in their life they can be counted on, and they're faithful in little things. I look at little things to see how people handle big things. You know, the person that runs my facility here in California is named Carlos. And I noticed whenever Carlos would go to the store, whatever, if he bought something for himself, he came back and said, I bought myself, a soda, here's $2 because I put it on the card with the other things. When I saw how he handled the $2, I would let Carlos be a signer in my checking account because he proved by how he handled little things, how he can handle bigger things.
Yeah, right.
So faithful is the key. Being responsible, meaning that if I say I'm going to do something, come hell or high water, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. You can take me at my word, whatever that might be, whatever it might be, I say. And the third one is one that I admire you for so much, Pastor, and that is doing more than what's expected. There's a spirit of excellence. And when we have that spirit of excellence, it will cause us to stand out in the marketplace. People will talk about us. People will be looking for us. When others are looking for a job, the other people are looking for us because of that reputation we have of doing more than what's expected. And I think if a person has those three attributes, there's incredible opportunities are waiting for them. Again, but we've got to believe they're there and looking for them. And I want to speak to some of you out there that, maybe are really motivated to do something. And you have some resources. This, for those that aren't in fear, can be a great opportunity to find some deals. Some businesses maybe to buy, some investments maybe to make. Because whenever there's a time of crisis, it normally creates a financial inversion. An inversion means that quickly things change. The word comes from when like in Minnesota, the lake is frozen, and all of a sudden the temperature gets to a certain degree, and it's like boom, it flips just like that, and the cold goes to the bottom and the hot comes at the top. It's a quick inversion. Well, we're in an inversion right now, and because of that, there's some deals that are out there. One of my board members just bought a piece of property. He was trying to get it for some time. They wouldn't budget the price, $2.5 million, and he was able to buy it for $1.4. So he got saved himself like $1 million. Why? Because the timing is right. He recognized it and he made the move. And so there could be deals out there for you. And I would say to you, if you're in that kind of a position, if you can stay out of fear,
right,
and be looking for opportunities, they're out there waiting for you.
I love that. Faithful, responsible, and the third one was excellence.
Excellence, yeah. Excellence. That's your trademark, man.
Try to keep it.
Well, you're actually all three as far as I'm concerned. But where I really stand out in everything about your life and everything about your church and your ministry is excellence. And that's one reason I really believe that one of the greatest things a leader can do is be hooked up to a church such as yours, because they will grow and they will make money attending your church and tithing to your church because of just being connected to it. I believe it's, and let's talk about that for just a moment.
Okay.
The pastor didn't ask me to say this.
Okay.
I'm talking to you from my heart. I'm talking to you from a businessman's perspective because I was in business for 16 years before I went into the speaking arena. So I come from a businessman's background. And this is something that I learned. I learned that even in difficult times, if I would be faithful in my giving, that act of being faithful created an environment of faith that surrounded my life and my finances. But if I backed off of my giving, I was literally walking into an environment of fear. Fear that I wouldn't have enough, fear that God wouldn't perform his word. And so I have formed the habit pattern of, regardless of what I'm going through, of giving. And sometimes even planting a sacrificial breakthrough seed in order to get to the next level. Because if I don't seed now, I don't have a future. A farmer cannot say, I'm not going to plant any seed, but I'm going to believe for harvest in the future. There is no harvest if you don't plant seed. And so I would encourage you out there, be faithful in your giving. It's a little bit harder now. You're not walking in a building, and nobody's talking about it maybe. But see, this is back to responsible. This is back to faithful. And if you'll do that and keep planting your seed, I believe you're going to be surprised at the harvest that comes now and in the future. The prophet went to the widow woman. Back to that story. He opened up the door thinking, oh my, take care of me. She said, I'm down to my last handful of meal. I mean, look at the prophet's standpoint. You think, my goodness, I'm at the wrong house.
Right.
Did I miss it?
Yeah.
God, what was that address again?
Different widow.
This can't be the right house. She's down to her last full of meal and getting ready to starve. But look at the widow woman's perspective. She was down to her last meal.
Mm.
And when the prophet spoke, she responded and gave her last meal. And because she acted in faith,
Right. So good.
that act of faith triggered God to move on the scene. And it said that she and her son and the prophet had enough for the entire famine. And that's what God can do for you if you're faithful in your giving. This is also a good time to maybe examine excess baggage. If I go out to the airport and I'm American when I fly because I'm a top level flyer, I can check 3 bags. But if I go out with a 4th bag, they say, I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison, that's going to be $100 for the extra bag. They charge me extra for the extra luggage. And sometimes we're going through life with extra luggage. And this is a good time to see, is there luggage I can get rid of? A good example of that, it was a story I heard a while ago about these 5-man prisoners during the Civil War, Confederate prisoners. And they were able to escape from the jail, the Union jail. And as they're escaping, they came across a hot air balloon. They commandeered the balloon and they took off. And they said, now we're going to be free because the dogs and the people can't catch us. They can't go as fast as the balloon. But what they didn't realize was 2 things. Number one, they took off and the hot air balloon hadn't been totally assembled, so it didn't have the fire mechanism. So they had no way to generate heat. The second thing they didn't think about is the wind was blowing out to the ocean. And so they were being blown out, away from land, and they're beginning to panic. But now the hot air begins to cool. As it cools, the balloon begins to settle, and they're almost ready to crash into the ocean, and they're going to drown. And he said, what can we do? We got to get rid of some weight. So they start throwing things overboard. They throw their guns overboard. They throw their boots overboard, and the balloon begins to pick up again. Then they go out a little bit further, and the balloon begins to come down again. They say, oh, well, what do we got to do? We got to give it to something else. And they realized that the basket was heavy. They said, we could tie ourselves to the rope. We don't need the basket. And they got rid of the basket. The balloon went back up and ended up taken to the land, and they were free. Wow. Those 5 men lived only because of one thing. They were willing to get rid of things that were holding them down.
So good.
And maybe during this season, there's some things you need to get rid of that are holding you down. Maybe some old habit patterns. Maybe some negative friends. Maybe some tasks that you've been doing that aren't productive anymore that were once productive. And if you'll take those and get them out of your balloon's going to fly, and it's going to take you to your new destination and new freedom.
Bob, that was excellent. That was profound. The whole visual, I could see the whole thing happening before our very eyes, of that balloon going up and losing its weight and throwing things overboard in a panic, frantically trying to clear out stuff. That's excellent. Bob, I have been really impacted. I've always, you've heard it said before, where have you been all my life?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that. Where have you been? And I know where you've been. I've heard of the Increase Maui conference for years. Never felt I was supposed to attend until I was invited by Phil Livatore, and I came, and it started to spark something in me that was there before, the entrepreneurial spirit that I had to start businesses or start something. And I found a way to start to tap into that, to be able to become more, not just a pastor, not for the sake of becoming an entrepreneur, but what my friend Obed Martinez calls a pastorpreneur. I don't know if you made that up or he made that up.
Yeah,
but
he probably did. He's always making up coining words.
Yeah, he's really good with that.
Yeah.
And I just feel like as part of my arsenal, or part of what I do now, is not just pastoring, but I do. That's a great call. I'm honored that I get to do that, especially here in the state of Hawaii. The mantle that God has given us, the position that we have is incredible. I love that. But I'm also seeing that God's opening up doors through the influencers network to be able to minister to business people, marketplace people in all spheres of society. I want to credit you. Of course, it was God, but also I want to credit you for providing that spark all over again and putting me in an environment where I'm growing in a different way. So thank you so much.
But it came out of a need in my life when I had the Chrysler dealership. And we were going through some battles because at that time Chrysler was not as financially stable like it is now. In fact, it was in danger of the company closing.
This was during the Lee Iacocca days?
Yeah, before I came aboard and saved it. Yeah. I had great difficulty in finding fellowship with other Christian leaders and teaching biblical teaching that would apply to my business. I heard a lot of theological teaching, but right. I had trouble finding out how to get the promises of Abraham into my business. Abraham was out there and I needed him in my business.
Right.
So it's one of the things that inspired me to start these events years ago. And they're so unique because we mix the spiritual and we mix the natural. I understand that leaders want to get it and they want to get it quickly. So we do 4 to 7 speakers a day. We get done at 1 o'clock because they want to have time to, fellowship with each other and be able to take in what they've learned already before they have to get given more. And so it's a very unique event. And if any leaders want to come this next year, it's going to be March. And this next year, we're leaving Maui after all these years, and we're going over to the Big Island. And we're going to be at the Hilton Waikoloa in March. And I just encourage you, if you want to get information on it, you can go to our website, www.increase.org. I'm not trying to get you there. We're going to sell out. But I just want the right people there. And I know many of the leaders that come to your church, Mike, are the right kind of people because they're big thinkers and they're people that want to do more for the kingdom. And those are the people we want to impact.
They've learned so much, and so have I. It has been one of the best things. It is a constant go-to for me from now on, moving forward, for the rest of, until Jesus comes back for the rest of my life, that this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the Increase Maui event because it has enhanced the way that I eat things, the way that I do things. We've brought probably in 2 years 16 couples, 17 couples. But we're coming back with even more, and they're so committed. They're so excited about it. They're telling their friends it's going to sell pretty soon, and it's going to be on my favorite island, which is the Big Island, which is where I was born and raised.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
We're on a different side, Art, but we're still in the same island. Yeah,
and you're at the Waikoloa. Waikoloa is beautiful.
Oh,
it's my favorite part of it.
It's one of my favorite resorts anywhere in the world. It's really, and the speakers are going to be great. It's just going to be a tremendous time.
Bob, you're
one of the speakers. I'm really excited about that, coming back and being with us again. Yeah.
I'm honored to accept that invitation. I didn't have to think twice about it. I just had to check the calendar to make sure that nothing else was competing. Thank you so much, Bob.
Your answer to me when I asked you to speak was really unique because you answered yes before I formally told you all the terms and conditions. You didn't care you were coming.
I don't care. I'm coming.
Yeah.
I'm coming to learn, and I'm coming just to share a little bit of what I learned along the way. But thank you so much, Bob. You've been incredible, such an inspiration. I've always admired you. I'm appreciative of you and all that you mean to us, and we got to connect more often. So I want to you put that on me, okay? We'll put that on me.
And I just want to say to those of you that are watching, don't get moved so much by what's going on the outside. Your success and your increase is not dependent upon what's happening outside of you. It's dependent upon what's happening inside of you. Right. And if you stay spiritually empowered, mentally strong, physically strong, I believe that God has great opportunities for you, and you're going to come out of this season with new concepts, new ideas, maybe new products, but you're going to be stronger than you were going into it. And that's what I'm believing for you.
Thank you so much, Bob. We appreciate you. Thank you for that blessing. You have a great weekend and a great graduation ceremony for your grandson. And thank you for making time out of your busy schedule. I know you are in high demand at this moment. So always was, always will be. Thank you.
Always there for you, Mike. Thank you. God bless you.
God bless.